His ex showed up at our honeymoon with a baby. His baby. The salty breeze from the ocean kissed my skin as I stretched on the sun lounger, a blissful sigh escaping my lips. This was it. The honeymoon of my dreams. Just 2 days ago, I had married the love of my life, Jake, in a beautiful sunset ceremony. Now, we were here, on a secluded island resort, celebrating our forever. Jake walked up with 2 glasses of champagne, his golden tan glowing under the afternoon sun. "To us," he said, clinking his glass against mine. "To us," I echoed, feeling nothing but happiness. But happiness is a fragile thing, isn't it? Just as I took a sip, I heard it. A woman's voice. Soft, hesitant, but unmistakably familiar. "Jake?" I turned my head so fast I nearly knocked over my drink. Standing there at the edge of our private cabana was Olivia, Jake's ex-girlfriend. And in her arms, a baby. My heart dropped. Jake froze beside me, his face draining of color. "Olivia?" His voice barely came out. She stepped closer, her grip tightening around the small bundle in her arms. I didn't know where else to go," she said, her voice trembling. "Jake, we need to talk." The world around me faded. The waves, the warmth, the happiness. All that remained was Olivia, the baby, and the terrifying feeling clawing at my chest. "Who's the baby?" I asked, though deep down I already knew. Olivia swallowed hard, then met my gaze with apologetic eyes. "He's Jake's." The ground beneath me might as well have cracked open. The world tilted around me. I gripped the edge of my lounger, my nails digging into the fabric, trying to steady myself. Jake didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stood there, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought he might crack a tooth. Olivia shifted the baby in her arms. The infant stirred, letting out a soft whimper, and that tiny sound shattered something inside me. "Jake," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Tell me she's lying." He inhaled sharply, but he still wouldn't look at me. That was answer enough. My stomach churned. I had just married this man, vowed to spend the rest of my life with him. And now, not even 48 hours later, I was standing on a tropical beach, face to face with the mother of his child. Olivia took another step forward. "I swear I wouldn't have come if I had any other choice," she said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were pleading. "Jake, I tried reaching you. I left messages, emails. You never responded." I snapped my head toward him. "You knew about this?" My voice cracked. "No." Jake finally spoke, his voice rough with emotion. "I swear I didn't know. I never got any messages, Olivia. If I had—" He stopped himself, dragging a hand down his face. "I would have— I don't know. I would have done something." Olivia let out a humorless laugh. "Well, now you can. Because he's your responsibility, Jake." The baby stirred again, tiny fingers curling against her shoulder. I couldn't stop staring at him. He had the same dark brown hair as Jake, the same strong jawline in miniature. My chest tightened painfully. I turned away, pressing my hand to my forehead, trying to think, to breathe. "This can't be happening," I whispered. Jake moved toward me, but I took a step back. "Don't," I said. "Just don't. Please listen to me," he begged. "I don't know how this happened. Olivia and we broke up nearly a year ago." He ran a shaky hand through his hair. "She never told me she was pregnant." "You should have known," I snapped. "You should have—" My voice caught. I had trusted him. I had built my future around him. And now everything felt like it was slipping through my fingers. Olivia let out a deep breath. "I didn't come here to ruin your marriage," she said. "I came because I need help. I can't do this alone, Jake. He needs his father." The silence that followed was suffocating. Then, Jake whispered the words that made my heart shatter completely. "I need to know if he's really mine." The baby let out a tiny, sleepy sigh. And for the first time, I wondered if my marriage had just ended before it had even truly begun. The weight of Jake's words hung between us like a storm cloud. I need to know if he's really mine. Olivia's grip on the baby tightened. Her eyes darkened, hurt flashing across her face. "You think I'd lie about this?" she whispered. Jake didn't answer immediately. He just exhaled sharply and ran a hand down his face. "I don't know what to think, Olivia. You show up here on my honeymoon with a baby I didn't even know existed." He shook his head. "I need proof." I crossed my arms over my chest, my body numb. "And if he is yours, Jake?" My voice was barely above a whisper. "Then what?" Jake turned to me, his eyes pleading. "I don't know yet, but please don't shut me out." I let out a bitter laugh. "You shut me out the moment she walked in." My voice wavered, but I refused to break. Not in front of Olivia. Not in front of the baby who might destroy my marriage before it even began. Olivia let out a sigh and reached into her bag. She pulled out a folded document and tossed it onto the lounge chair beside Jake. "Here," she said flatly. "A paternity test takes time, but this is his birth certificate. Your name isn't on it, but the dates line up, Jake." Jake hesitated before picking up the paper. I saw his throat bob as he swallowed hard. "His name is Liam," Olivia said softly. Liam. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. I had spent years imagining a future with Jake, maybe even kids of our own one day. But not like this. Not with her. Jake looked up from the paper, his jaw tightening. "I'll take the test." His voice was firm, decisive. "If he's mine, I won't turn my back on him." His words felt like a knife to my chest. And that was when I realized something. It didn't matter if he had known before or not. It didn't matter if Liam was his or not, because either way, everything had changed. The life I thought we were building together, it wasn't ours anymore. It was mine, and his, and Olivia's. I took a step back, the warm sand sinking beneath my feet. "I need some time," I murmured. Jake's face paled. "Babe, please." But I was already walking away, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore drowning out his voice. I didn't know if I was walking away for a moment, or for good. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away. The resort's private beach stretched endlessly before me, the waves lapping at the shore, whispering secrets I no longer wanted to hear. My honeymoon had turned into a nightmare. Jake had a child. Maybe. But even the maybe was enough to crack the foundation of our brand new marriage. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hold in the storm raging inside me. A part of me wanted to scream at Jake, to demand how he could have let this happen. Another part wanted to collapse and cry, to mourn the perfect future I thought we had. And the worst part? A small guilty voice inside me whispered, "What if you can't handle this? What if you aren't strong enough to stay?" I found myself near the resort's beachside bar. The warm glow of lanterns lit up the area, and I slid onto an empty stool. "A margarita, please," I muttered to the bartender, desperate for something, anything, to take the edge off. I barely noticed the man sitting next to me until he spoke. "Rough night?" I turned to find a pair of kind brown eyes watching me. He had dark hair, sun-kissed skin, and the easy confidence of someone who belonged near the ocean. He wasn't Jake, but right now that was a good thing. "You could say that," I murmured, taking a sip of my drink. "Want to talk about it?" he asked. I let out a humorless laugh. "Not really." He nodded as if he understood. "I'm Noah, by the way." "Emily." Noah gave me a small, knowing smile. "Well, Emily, I don't know what's got you looking like you just got punched in the gut, but if it helps, I've been told I'm a great listener." I hesitated. I shouldn't be sitting here talking to some stranger, but the alternative was going back to that cabana, facing Jake, Olivia, and the baby-shaped bomb that had just detonated my life. So I found myself saying, "What would you do if the person you loved, the person you just married, suddenly had a past they never told you about. Noah's brow furrowed. Depends. Did they know about it? I swallowed. Number, but it doesn't change the fact that I know about it now. He took a sip of his drink, considering. I guess the real question is, do you still see a future with them, knowing what you know now? I stared at him, my fingers tightening around my glass. Did I? I didn't get the chance to answer, because at that moment I heard Jake's voice behind me. Emily? I turned, my stomach twisting as I met his desperate, stormy gaze. You walked away, he said, his voice raw. But please, don't walk away from us. And just like that, I was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring down, trying to decide if I should jump or turn back. I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening around my glass. Jake stood there, chest rising and falling like he had just run to find me. His blue eyes that once made me feel safe, were now filled with panic. Noah shifted beside me, giving Jake a curious glance. I'm guessing you're the reason for the rough night? Jake ignored him, his gaze locked on me. Emily, we need to talk. A bitter laugh escaped me. Oh, now we need to talk? I shook my head, standing from my stool. Jake, do you even understand what you've just done to us? He exhaled sharply, dragging a hand through his already messy hair. I didn't do anything, Em. I had no idea about Liam. You have to believe me. I stared at him, at the man I had promised to spend my life with. The man who now had a past that would shape our future in ways I wasn't sure I could handle. Noah stood, sensing the tension. I'll leave you two to it. He gave me a small nod before walking away. Jake's jaw clenched as he watched him go. Who the hell was that? I rolled my eyes. Not the problem right now, Jake. His hands found his hips, frustration clear on his face. So, what? You just run off and start drinking with random guys? You don't get to be jealous right now, I snapped. You don't get to act like I'm the problem when your ex just showed up to our honeymoon with your child. His face fell. I know. He sighed, his voice softer now. I know, Emily, and I don't blame you for being angry, but please, just talk to me. I crossed my arms. Fine, let's talk. What happens when that paternity test comes back and confirms what we both already know? Then what, Jake? He hesitated, and that silence was my answer. You don't even know, do you? I whispered. You say you didn't know about Liam, and maybe that's true. But now that you do know, you have a responsibility to him. Jake stepped closer, his voice thick with emotion. I know, and I want to do the right thing. But that doesn't mean I want to lose you. I let out a shaky breath. Jake, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can start our marriage already playing second to something else. You won't be second, he said quickly. But we both knew that was a lie. Maybe not a lie he meant to tell, but a lie nonetheless. Because if Liam was his, Jake would have to put him first. And no matter how much I loved him, I couldn't ignore that. Jake reached for my hands, his touch warm, familiar. Emily, please, he whispered, don't give up on us yet. I looked into his eyes and saw the man I loved, the man I married, but I also saw the man who now had a child with someone else. I had a choice to make. Stay and fight for us, or walk away before I got in too deep. I took a deep breath, because I finally knew what I had to do. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. The weight of Jake's hands around mine felt like an anchor, pulling me back into something I wasn't sure I wanted anymore. Jake, I started, my voice barely above a whisper. I love you. I wouldn't have married you if I didn't. But this, I gestured vaguely toward the night, toward the chaos Olivia had brought into our lives. This isn't what I signed up for. His grip on my hands tightened. I know it's not. And I know this is unfair to you, but Emily, Please, don't walk away from us. I stared at him, trying to find the right words. The thing was, I wasn't just scared. I wasn't just hurt. I was angry, because I had spent months dreaming of a future with Jake. Just us, newlyweds, figuring out life together. And now, I wasn't just a wife. I was expected to be something else. Something I didn't know how to be. A stepmother? A bystander in Jake's new life as a father? I wasn't sure I could handle either. Jake, I said slowly, my throat tightening. What if I can't do this? His face crumpled for a moment before he masked it with determination. Then we figure it out together, he said. Emily, I don't want to lose you. I love you. And yes, this is messy. It's not what I planned either. But we can get through this. I shook my head. You don't even know what this is yet. I pulled my hands away from his and took a step back. You need to go back and take care of that baby, Jake. Your baby. He's innocent in all of this, but I can't. My voice broke. I can't be part of this right now. Jake's face went pale. Emily, please. Tears stung my eyes, but I forced myself to stay strong. I need space. I need time to figure out if this is a life I can handle. His chest rose and fell unevenly, his hands balling into fists at his sides. So you're leaving me? I hesitated. Was I? Number not yet. I'm pausing us, I said, because if I stay right now, I'll resent you. And I don't want that. Jake swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. How long? I shook my head. I don't know. Silence stretched between us, filled only by the sound of the waves crashing against the shore. And then, for the first time since Olivia had shown up, I turned and walked away. And this time, Jake didn't stop me. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away. Away from Jake, away from Olivia, away from the life I had just promised myself, one that now felt like a lie. By the time I reached our villa, my hands were shaking. I shoved the door open and collapsed onto the bed, staring up at the ceiling as tears slid down my temples. I had walked away. Not forever. Not yet. But long enough to realize something deep in my gut. I might never come back. A soft knock at the door made me sit up, my heart pounding. For one crazy second, I thought it was Jake, that he had followed me, that he was going to fight for me. But when I opened the door, it wasn't Jake standing there. It was Olivia. My stomach turned to stone. What do you want? I asked, my voice hollow. She looked exhausted. Her blonde hair was messy, and she had dark circles under her eyes. Liam was asleep in her arms, his tiny mouth slightly open, his little hand curled into a fist against her chest. For a second, just a second, something inside me softened. But then I remembered why she was here, and what her presence had done to my life. I won't stay long, she said quietly. I thought you deserved to hear this from me. I crossed my arms. Hear what? She let out a shaky breath. I didn't come here to ruin your marriage, Emily. I laughed bitterly. Well, congratulations. You did anyway. She flinched but didn't argue. I don't expect you to believe me, but I never wanted it to happen like this. I tried reaching Jake. For months. When he didn't respond, I thought he didn't care. That he had moved on and wanted nothing to do with us. She looked down at Liam, brushing her fingers over his tiny hand. But I had to try one last time. I swallowed the lump in my throat. And what happens now? She met my gaze, something unreadable in her eyes. That depends on Jake. And on you. I shook my head. It depends on him, I said, looking at the baby in her arms. Because no matter what Jake or I want, Liam comes first now. Something flickered in Olivia's expression. Surprise? Maybe even respect. I know this isn't fair to you, she admitted. And I know it's not what you imagined for your life. I exhaled shakily, gripping the doorframe for support. Number it's not. She hesitated before saying, but for what it's worth, I think you love him enough to try. My chest tightened. Did I? Olivia stepped back. I just thought you should know the truth. Whatever you decide, I won't stand in your way. I watched as she turned and walked down the path, disappearing into the night with Liam still sleeping against her shoulder. I closed the door, pressing my forehead against the cool wood. I had a choice to make. Walk away and start over, or stay and try to make this work. And for the first time since Olivia had shown up, I didn't know what I wanted anymore. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind spun in circles, replaying every second of the last 24 hours. Jake, Olivia, Liam, Mr. No matter how I tried to look at it, I felt like an outsider in my own marriage. By morning, the sun cast a golden glow through the villa's sheer curtains, but I felt nothing but a cold emptiness inside. I had dreamed of waking up next to Jake, wrapped in the bliss of our honeymoon. Instead, I was waking up alone, on the edge of a life I wasn't sure I wanted anymore. A soft knock at the door broke the silence. For a moment, I debated ignoring it, but something told me this conversation was inevitable. I opened the door to find Jake standing there, his face tired, his eyes desperate. He held 2 coffee cups in his hands, an unspoken peace offering. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. I hesitated but stepped aside, letting him in. Jake placed the coffees on the small table near the window, rubbing the back of his neck. "I haven't slept," he admitted. "Me neither." He looked at me then, his blue eyes filled with so much emotion it almost made me crumble. Almost. "Emily, I love you," he said. "That hasn't changed. Will never change." He took a shaky breath. "But I need to be honest with you about something." My stomach twisted. "Go on." Jake sat down, running a hand over his face. "Last night, after you left, I stayed with Olivia and Liam. He cried a lot. And when she finally got him to sleep, we talked." A lump formed in my throat. "About what?" He looked up at me, his expression unreadable. "About what happens next." Silence stretched between us. "Emily, I don't want to lose you," he continued. "But I also can't ignore this. I won't. Liam needs me. And no matter how complicated this is, I have to step up." I swallowed hard. "I know that." He exhaled, relieved. "And I want to do this with you. I don't want to go through this alone." My heart clenched. "Jake, I don't know if I can do this with you." His face fell. I love you," I interrupted. "But this isn't just about us anymore. It's about Olivia and Liam, and the fact that no matter what, I will always come second to them." Jake reached for my hands. "That's not true." I pulled away, shaking my head. "It is true, Jake, and it should be. Liam is your son." I looked at him, tears brimming in my eyes. "But I didn't marry into this. I married you. And now suddenly I have to figure out if I can handle a life I never planned for." Jake looked shattered. "So, what are you saying?" I took a deep breath, my hands trembling. "I'm saying I need time." His jaw tightened, his shoulders tensing. "Time for what?" I blinked back tears. "To decide if I can stay." The words landed between us like a final blow. Jake looked like he wanted to argue, to convince me to stay right then and there. But instead, he just nodded, his face etched with pain. "Okay," he said finally. "If that's what you need, I'll give it to you." I nodded, even though it felt like my heart was breaking. Because deep down, I knew the truth. Time wasn't going to fix this. Time was only going to make me realize what I had been too afraid to admit. That maybe I had already made my choice. I left the villa that afternoon needing space, needing air, needing anything but the suffocating weight of my own thoughts. Jake had said he'd give me time. But what did time even mean? A day? A week? A lifetime? I wandered along the shoreline, the waves lapping at my feet, my mind racing. Could I really do this? Could I stay married to Jake knowing that my entire future had changed overnight? Deep thoughts? I turned to see Noah standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets, watching me. I sighed. You could say that. He stepped closer, studying me. You look like someone trying to convince herself to do the impossible. I let out a dry laugh. Maybe I am. Noah tilted his head. Let me guess. You love him, but you're scared that love won't be enough. I swallowed hard. Something like that. He nodded as if he understood more than I expected him to. You know, I've seen couples survive worse. Like what? I asked. Infidelity, tragedy, distance. He shrugged. But you know what I haven't seen work? When one person stays out of guilt instead of love. I frowned. I'm not staying out of guilt. Noah raised an eyebrow. Aren't you? I opened my mouth to argue, but the words died before they could form. Was I? I had loved Jake with everything I had. I had planned a life with him, a future. But now I was questioning if I was staying because I wanted to, or because I felt like walking away made me a terrible person. Noah must have seen the war in my eyes because he sighed. Look, I don't know you. I don't know Jake. But I do know this. Love shouldn't feel like a prison sentence. I turned away, staring at the waves. I just don't know if I can be what he needs me to be. Then maybe that's your answer, Noah said softly. I closed my eyes, the realization sinking in. I knew what I had to do. And as painful as it was, I also knew that loving someone sometimes meant letting them go. Should Emily say goodbye to Jake for good? Or should she give it one last chance? Let me know how you want part 10 to unfold. The sun was starting to set, casting warm orange hues over the ocean. I had spent hours walking, thinking, replaying every moment with Jake in my mind. Every laugh, every promise, every whispered, I love you. But love alone wasn't always enough. I knew that now. With my heart pounding, I made my way back to the villa. The door was slightly ajar, as if Jake had been waiting, hoping I'd come back. When I stepped inside, he was sitting on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. At the sound of the door closing, he looked up. Emily. He breathed, standing. I forced myself to meet his gaze, my chest tightening at the pain I saw in his eyes. We need to talk, I said softly. Jake swallowed hard, nodding. Yeah, we do. I walked past him and sat down in the chair near the window. He turned to face me, his hands clenched at his sides. I love you, Jake, I started, my voice shaking. And I know you love me, but love isn't enough to make this work. His face paled. Emily, don't... Please, I whispered. Let me say this. He pressed his lips together, nodding tightly. I took a shaky breath. You have a son now, a baby who needs you more than anything. And I know you. I know you'll be a great father. But Jake, that means your life isn't just yours anymore. And it isn't ours anymore either. It's his. Jake ran a hand through his hair, pacing slightly. We can figure it out, Emily. You don't have to leave. His voice cracked. I don't want you to leave. Tears burned in my eyes. And I don't want to. But if I stay, I'll always feel like I'm competing with something I can't win against. And I don't want to win. Liam deserves all of you, Jake. He deserves a father who isn't torn between his past and his future. Jake took a step toward me. You are my future, Emily. I shook my head. No, Jake. I was your future when it was just us. But now there's more. There's him. And I can't be the person standing in the way of that. He stared at me, chest rising and falling unevenly, hands shaking. So what? That's it? You're leaving? I wiped a tear from my cheek. I think I already knew my answer the moment Olivia showed up. Jake inhaled sharply, looking away, his jaw clenching. "This isn't fair," he whispered. "I know," I said, my voice breaking, "but it's what's right." Silence stretched between us, filled only by the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore. Finally, Jake exhaled, defeated. "I don't know how to say goodbye to you." I let out a soft, sad smile. "Then don't. Just remember me as the girl who loved you enough to let you go." A tear slipped down his cheek, and it shattered me more than anything. He didn't try to stop me when I stood, when I picked up my bag, when I pressed one last, lingering kiss against his lips. And when I walked out of that villa, leaving behind the man I had once dreamed of forever with. I didn't look back. I walked out of the villa, feeling a deep emptiness settling in my chest. It was done. Over. As I walked toward the beach, the sounds of the waves crashing against the shore were drowned out by the thundering of my heart. I had made my choice. Jake was no longer a part of my future. I needed to breathe, to feel something else. Anything. But just as I reached the sand, I heard the unmistakable sound of a car engine revving. I turned, my heart racing, and saw a figure speeding toward me. It was Jake. He slammed the brakes, the tires screeching as the car came to a halt just inches from where I stood. "Emily, wait," he shouted, jumping out of the car. I froze, the weight of his words hanging in the air between us. "Jake, I've made my decision. Please." But before I could finish, the sound of a loud crash filled the air, and everything around us seemed to stop. I whipped around, my breath catching in my throat. From the corner of the road, Olivia's car had barreled into a guardrail. The impact was so forceful that the front of the car was crumpled like paper. "No," I gasped. Without thinking, I sprinted toward the wreck, Jake hot on my heels. The car was barely recognizable, smoke pouring from the hood. I threw open the door, frantic. Inside, Olivia was unconscious, blood staining the seat. Liam was crying in the back, strapped into his car seat. "Olivia! Olivia!" I screamed, shaking her. Her eyes flickered open, weakly. "Emily. The baby. Please." Before I could respond, I heard Jake's voice behind me. "We need to get them out of here." I turned to him, my heart racing, but then I saw it. The look in his eyes. A look of panic and something else. Something I couldn't place. "What's going on, Jake?" I asked, breathless. He took a step back, his voice barely a whisper. "Emily, I need to tell you something." My heart skipped. "What? What is it?" He swallowed hard, his hands shaking. "The baby, Liam, he's not mine." I stared at him, confused. "What do you mean?" Olivia said. Jake shook his head, his voice low and filled with regret. Olivia lied. "Liam is someone else's. She tricked me." The world around me spun. Liam wasn't Jake's child. I took a step back, the air thick with disbelief. But you thought he was yours. You..." His eyes met mine, filled with sorrow. "I know. And I thought I could handle it, but Emily, I made a huge mistake." Just then, paramedics arrived, rushing toward Olivia's car. They began working frantically, trying to stabilize her. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Olivia had lied. Everything had been a lie. The love I thought I had been fighting for, the life I had thought I was walking away from, had been built on a foundation of deception. As the paramedics wheeled Olivia away, still unconscious, I turned to Jake. My heart ached, my mind racing with everything I had just learned. "You lied to me too," I whispered, my voice breaking. Jake's face crumpled, guilt flooding his features. "I never knew. I swear, Emily." I shook my head, taking a few steps back. "I don't know who you are anymore, Jake." And in that moment, with everything I had just discovered, I made the final decision. I turned and walked away, feeling the weight of every broken promise behind me. As I disappeared into the distance, I heard Jake call my name, but I didn't look back. Because the truth was the final thing that shattered us.